place. Ultimately, British government took over the control from East India Company and they started ruling India. They abolished Supreme Court of Judicature at these three presidency towns, and by Indian High Courts Act 1861, three high courts came to be established. Three high courts in Bombay, Madras, and Calcutta. The Charter of 1862 and later on other letters patent also conferred jurisdiction on British Crown to establish new courts also. But it is very interesting in the context whether it's a new jurisdiction or an old jurisdiction, that only these three Supreme Courts that came to be abolished by Indian High Courts Act 1861, they derived or they continued to inherit the jurisdiction of issuing traditional writs. So subsequent high courts that came to be established by later charters, other than these three presidency high courts, did not possess the traditional writ jurisdiction. Please keep in mind, this distinction is very important because sometimes there may be a case where you may have to go into the historical aspect of this jurisdiction. Because of not addressing the historical aspect of this jurisdiction, the Honorable Supreme Court has recently committed some mistakes in pronouncing judgment in Radheshyam versus Chabinath, as well as Shri Jogendra Singh Ji, Vijay Singh Ji versus State of Gujarat. These are the two recent decisions which have, to some extent, discussed 226 and 227. But these historical aspects have been ignored. So these only three high courts inherited jurisdiction of issuing prerogative writs. Prerogative writs, this Supreme Court jurisdiction of original charter were preserved by section 9 to 11 of the Indian High Courts Act, which preserved the jurisdiction of issuing writs in these three high courts. So other high courts admittedly did not possess any jurisdiction of issuing traditional writs. Now there is one more important development which probably one may not be aware of. That is writ of habeas corpus. Many of us might be thinking that it's a common law writ, and prior to the enactment of the Constitution of India, the high courts, these presidency high courts, were issuing these writs as a common law writ. That is not correct. There is one section, that is section 491 of the Code of Criminal Procedure 1898, that introduced a power of issuing writ of habeas corpus, and powers were conferred on the High Court under section 491 of the CRPC to issue a writ of habeas corpus. This is a specific power. So the common law power of issuing traditional habeas corpus also ceased to be possessed by even these three presidency town high courts upon enactment of section 491. So writ of habeas corpus ceased to be a prerogative writ, but it became a statutory writ by section 491 of CRPC. Similarly, Specific Relief Act, not 1963, earlier Specific Relief Act, section 45 to section 50, provided for issuance of mandamus. So even writ of mandamus was no longer a traditional writ or common law writ, prerogative writ, after enactment of section 45. So at least these two writs ceased to be prerogative writs and they became statutory writs. Now coming to the enactment of Article 226 in the present form. I may just broadly state what is this article. The article states that notwithstanding anything contained in Article 32, every High Court shall have power throughout the territory in respect of which it exercises the power to issue to any person, please bear in mind, any person or authority, and in appropriate case, appropriate government. And what kind of directions can be issued? It says directions, orders, or writs. So in exercise of power conferred by the Article 226, first of all, Article 226 says that High Court has power to issue to any person or authority, and only in appropriate case to the government. Directions, orders, or writs. Now thereafter, it further states that including writs in the nature of. Now this is very interesting. Why this word in the nature of has come under Article 226, that I will discuss little later. But first of all, on the bare text of Article 226, including writs in the nature of habeas corpus, mandamus, prohibition, quo warranto, etc., or any of them. So this is another thing which one must keep in mind, that any of them. So it is not that only one writ or one direction has to be sought. You can combine the writs also, directions also. Any of them for the enforcement of fundamental right or any other purpose. So this is the bare text. Now what are the important aspects of this? Is first important aspect is any person. So coming to the second myth is that we have been taught from the beginning that your petition must contain an averment, that respondent is a state or instrumentality of state within the meaning of Article 12. I wonder how we have been taught like this. When Article 226 starts with that directions and orders can be issued to any person or authority, and only in appropriate case to the government. Why we have been taught like this, that every petition must contain an averment, that respondent is instrumentality or state or instrumentality of state under the Article 12. So my view on this aspect is that this is again a myth and misconception. Respondent, it is not necessary that it should be a state. The word any person has been used for special reasons. If you examine fundamental rights, you will find that many fundamental rights are available against any person also. But somehow we carry an impression that fundamental rights can be claimed against the state only. Now, if that was the correct interpretation, then how could a writ of habeas corpus is maintainable against private person? So constitutional makers are aware of all these things, that many fundamental rights are also available against private person. If I may begin with Article 15, sub-article 2, it says that in respect of any restaurant, hotel, or on any other place of public amusement or entertainment, nobody shall be discriminated on the ground of caste, race, sex, or religion. Now, once a person has opened a hotel and somebody is not allowed to enter into that hotel on the ground that he belongs to a particular religion. Is he not entitled to approach the High Court seeking a writ that once this hotel or restaurant is thrown open to public, I have a fundamental right to enter, and nobody can be discriminated on the ground of race, caste, sex or religion. So in that event, Article 15(2) can be claimed against private person. Article 17, which prohibits untouchability, that can also be claimed against private individual. Then Article 23, forced labor, begar, and Article 24, nobody should employ any person below 14 years age. So if, being an employer, I engage a person less than 14 years age, and somebody comes to know, he can very well file that petition in the High Court under Article 226, saying that this person is violating Article 23 or 24. And in that case, the Honorable Court cannot say that merely because the other side is not a state, we will not entertain a writ petition. So that is why the word person has perhaps found mention in Article 226. So it is true, there are series of judgments of the Honorable Supreme Court that this jurisdiction, which has been broadly described as writ jurisdiction, is a public law remedy. So even if a person is a private person, but either constitution or any statute has cast a public duty on him, a writ would be maintainable against a private person also. So this is the second myth which one must keep in mind, that not necessarily that in every case it should be a state. Usually, since it's a public law remedy, person should be either state or instrumentality of state. But very interesting and very correct interpretation of this Article 226 has been made by Justice D.P. Wadhwa in UP State Land Development Bank versus Chandrabhan Dubey, AIR 1999, Supreme Court, page 753. Honorable Justice Wadhwa says that, where do you bring this divide line of public law remedy and private law remedy? When Article 226 is sufficiently clear, there was no reason to interpret that it is merely a public law remedy. I welcome Mr. Yatin Oza, President of our bar. Please. So this judgment in UP State Land Development Bank, Justice Wadhwa has said that there is no such divide line under Article 226, that it is a public law remedy only. But usually, when a fundamental right is violated by a private action, it would be a private wrong, either it would be a criminal offense, it would be a tort, or it would be a civil wrong, which is usually justiciable in an ordinary civil court, because it would involve examination of various disputed question of facts, and it would also require leading of evidence. So this kind of jurisdiction, which is possessed by High Court under Article 226, which is a summary jurisdiction, is not a proper jurisdiction to be exercised, but it does not say that the jurisdiction is barred. So it is worth reading this judgment, and I have forgotten in respect of any person, I was about to cite two judgments where this any person has been interpreted by the Honorable Supreme Court. One is Anadi Mukta's case, that is EIR 1989, Supreme Court, page 1607, where the Honorable Supreme Court was concerned with a public trust, and REIT was claimed against the public trust. And the fundamental argument was that since it is not an instrumentality of state or state within the meaning of Article 12, REIT was not maintainable. Supreme Court repelled that contention and said that no, word any other person is there. And therefore, if a trust is imparting education or is performing some public duty, it can also be brought and it is amenable to jurisdiction under Article 226. Recently, this judgment has been followed. This is also, again, an interesting judgment, which is a very recent one, 15th December 2015 judgment in Dr. Janit Geopal versus SRM University. Now, SRM University was a deemed university, and the issue arose as to whether REIT was maintainable or not. Single judge of Madras High Court or some court entertained the petition. Division bench said that it is not maintainable. And recently the matter reached Honorable Supreme Court, and Honorable Supreme Court, relying upon the judgment in Anade Mukta's case, that is AR 1989, Supreme Court 1607, the Honorable Supreme Court said that no, imparting education is a public function, more particularly when the university has been conferred the status of a deemed university. And there are many other restrictions imposed on this university by statute, by virtue of the very recognition given as a deemed university, and therefore it would be amenable to this jurisdiction under Article 226. So these two judgments, this recent judgment, if you read, that would give complete idea of how this any person has been inserted and what does it actually mean. Now, the third myth which is prevalent is that it is an extraordinary jurisdiction. Now, it is also incorrect. The letters patent issued under the Indian High Courts Act, which are still in force because the competent legislature has not made any law contrary to the letters patent. So to the extent no law has been made, all letters patent are still in force. Therefore, we are still filing letters patent appeal under clause 15 because letters patents were issued in 1862. Then they were amended in 1990. So they are